Subscribe to this podcast to get exclusive access to the after show Shooting the Breeze. Hello and welcome to Cool Explorations. This is your host, Tony Peters. Today we will be listening to Dallas Block, who's from Rock Solid Refuge, which is a group home for boys who are really troubled, and they are a refuge and safe spot for them to go and be able to deal with the issues that they're dealing with, and to be able to get back to a normal life where they can be a part of a family again. Hello everyone, welcome to the Cool Explorations podcast. As I mentioned before, this is your host Tony Peters. We are with Dallas Block today of Rock Solid Refuge. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you do?
Hey, it's good to be with you today, Tony. Like you said, my name is Dallas Block. I am the executive director of Rock Solid Refuge. Rock Solid Refuge is a 12-month program for teens with life-controlling issues. We have students that come to our program from all across Canada with life-controlling issues like drug addictions, pornography addictions, challenging behaviors, suicidal ideation, depression, self-harm, those kinds of things is what we work with here at Rock Solid. We are the only, or one of the only, as far as we know, programs like it in all of Canada. So the students come here and stay with us. It's a residential program for 12 months or more sometimes. And we work basically from the ground up of what the challenges are that they are encountering from a biblical worldview as well. My background is I was a youth pastor for many years. My wife and I have worked with young people either as volunteers or in paid roles for almost our entire married lives. We're going to celebrate our 30th wedding anniversary this summer, just in another week or so, actually.
Congrats.
And yeah, so that's exciting. And almost all of that time, my wife and I have been involved with young people in one way or another. And so it's been a real blessing and privilege to even raise our own kids in the context of youth ministry. And through a process of time and circumstance, a young man came into our lives who was a crystal meth addict. And that was the first time we'd encountered drug addiction in that way. I never really experienced it close up before, and the devastation to the family, the grip that addictions has on a person just blew my mind, and just the conviction that God's grace and his goodness and his power belong in those situations was really what birthed Rock Solid Refuge.
Yeah, and I like that your program is kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So they don't really have anywhere to really go to fall back into what they were doing or run away, that kind of thing. And if they do, there's really no place to go to.
Yeah, it's pretty key. It's pretty key with the guys that we work with, that the distractions and the opportunities for those substances and those kinds of things are just removed for a period of time. Which gives us the ability to dig down and sort out the deeper issues, everything from the deeper spiritual issues to character issues, as well as background issues. And so gives us a venue. And often I describe it as we're like a greenhouse here. We're a place that's sheltered and protected, designed to inspire and give the opportunity for significant growth for a period of time before they're kind of put back out there where the winds of the world can kind of beat a person up a little bit, but there's something that's been given to them that can help them navigate life beyond here and differently than when they first came.
Yeah, it gives them that firm foundation, which I've mentioned before on the podcast and in devotions. Because firm foundation in Bible or prayer and church is very, very key in developing your personal life and growing spiritually and overcoming addictions. Yeah. And so before I get further into Rock Solid, why don't you tell me a little about your own testimony and how God has been working in your life?
Sure. Well, I had the privilege of growing up in a really solid Christian home. my my parents really demonstrated what true Christianity is, and even as the Bible describes true religion, which is everything from um, what do we really believe about ourselves, about God, about sin, about salvation, and my parents taught us and demonstrated for us the our need for God, just individually. But also, my parents demonstrated for us the responsibility we have not only for our own lives, but to take the gospel and God's goodness into the world around us. My parents were the kind of people that other people could count on if there was a need in the community or by a neighbor. My parents were the ones that were often called on, because they were the ones who were already known to be reaching out to people and helping people on all kinds of levels. And so I watched my parents demonstrate this for me. But as a teenager, that life of really serving God wasn't actually all that appealing to me, to be honest with you. I went through a fairly significant time of struggle as a teenager, and I could maybe attribute it to some level or another to the fact that my mom died in a car accident when I was 12, almost 13. And so navigating my teen years, trying to interpret how do I understand life and God in the context of this significant life altering experience, um, did change the way that I approached the world and my relationship with God for sure. But at the end of the day, we all have reasons why we maybe stray from God at different times in our lives. But God brought me back to a place as a young man to really submit to Him. But part of the issue was I knew from my parents' example that if I was a believer in Jesus Christ, that meant He owned my life. And for my teen years, for a chunk of them, I actually wasn't willing to give my life to Jesus. I wasn't willing for Him to be in charge. I didn't think He would provide a lot of fun. I like to think of myself as a fun person. I enjoy things. I enjoy lots of different kinds of activities. I like riding horse. I like snowboarding. I like to joke around and just I think life has been given to us to enjoy. And as a teenager, I assumed that God didn't have much of a fun life for us if we submitted to Him.
As many teens do.
So, but God brought me to a place of a crisis of belief, whether I would really follow Him or not. And I still to this day I describe it like kind of stepping off a cliff, because we don't know the future, right? God knows the future, but we don't. And as a teenager, with your whole life before you, it's a dividing line. It's, am I going this path or that path? And the Bible uses that type of language even, right? The narrow path and the broad path. And for a time, the broad path seemed really, really exciting. But I knew beyond the shadow of a doubt that God was real, God was true. I was accountable to Him, but I didn't know what that would look like if I really followed Him. And yet God brought me to the place to really surrender and to follow Him. So now when I talk to young people about that, that's 30 plus years ago for me now, and I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. So my encouragement to them is that, hey, God does have a journey for you. Will you step into what He's calling you and what He has in mind for you, or will you take your own path? If you take your own path, you get all that comes with that, but you don't get to necessarily decide what comes with that. So surrender to God and follow Him. So then, as a young man, my wife and I were married fairly young, as some would say, 20, 21, we were, and God just moved our hearts to get involved with young people. And we thought it was a phase, to be honest with you. We'll help in the youth group for a little bit in this church we were in. And that'll be good for a time. Then we'll have kids and we'll kind of do other things, whatever. But God just continued to move our hearts to work with young people. And it wasn't a career choice at that time. I'm a heavy duty mechanic by trade. But as God stirred our hearts, we just kept working with young people more and more. And in time, ended up moving from central Alberta, central kind of Western Alberta, Sundre, Alberta area, to Southwest Saskatchewan, where we knew nobody. And God brought us into a little church in Frontier. We just had an amazing time where God just blessed our ministry, but also blessed us with incredible friendships and ways in which God continued to develop in us what he needed to develop for what he had in mind for our future, which we had no idea about. And again, that whole journey has just been, our journey has just been a testament to God's faithfulness. So many things can be up in the air at any given time, and yet to see how God has been faithful to give us opportunities, to take care of us, to surround us with his people, with friends, with encouragement, all along the way. And then stepping into a ministry like Rock Solid Refuge and being a part of founding it, even being one of the founding board members, was something that I had never, ever envisioned being a part of. And yet just asking the question, first and foremost, is this what God is calling us to? And if we have a strong sense that it's what God is calling us to, he will affirm it with his people, and he will affirm it by being faithful in that. And so that's now it's 17 years ago, actually. 2005 was when we had first conversations about Rock Solid Refuge. And we just went for it. We just started marching it forward and seeing what God would do. God surrounded us with incredible people who had knowledge far beyond what I had in any of the things that were going to need to be done. We had to form a corporation. We had to form a charity. We had to have a board. We had to eventually have staff. We had to train staff. We had to do programming, and just one step at a time. And God was faithful through that. And all through that process, knowing that there's a segment of Canadian society, young people with addictions that are not being reached with the gospel of Jesus Christ in a way that they need to be reached. There's adult programs all across Canada, but there's not youth Christian programs for young people with addictions all across Canada. It's just not there. And so that's the passion that God put on our hearts, and that's what continues to drive what we do today.
Yeah, and the success rates on a lot of those other programs aren't very high. You guys have a higher success rate. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and success rate is an interesting thing, because I think there's categories for that. The obvious one is we want young people that have been caught up in addictions to stop using whatever that substance, pornography, whatever it is, and not do that anymore. And even that is as we know, even from the pornography issue, that's all too often a lifelong journey, right? But putting in foundations that moves a person outside of that to loving Jesus enough to replace the really the idol worship of the addiction is really what we have the privilege to navigate them towards. What's interesting, even students that finish our program and end up relapsing and having struggles a bit again, is how often the students will say, I just can't use like I did before. Something's different inside of me. It doesn't have the same flavor. I'm not inspired in it like I was before. It's not fun like it was before. And it's lost its luster. And we see them, reaching back to us and reaching out to their family and even church people that will help them navigate forward differently than they ever would have before. And so those are some of the key successes. Some other kind of successes that are less important, but yet really important as well, is just schooling. We had a student that graduated from our program last fall who had not finished grade 8, but he was 17 years old. We were able to graduate him from our Rock Solid Refuge program, and he had been a meth addict. So not only did he graduate from our Rock Solid Refuge program, but he also graduated with his Adult 12, which is a
Awesome.
essentially a grade 12 equivalent. And and he had no hope of that scenario either. And so some of those successes, which opened doors in ways that those doors wouldn't have been opened otherwise, without some of that. And the way we see parents and our students' relationships begin to be restored. Some of our parents would say chaos has been so thorough in their home that it's just constant anxiety to even have the young person in the house. They don't know if they can even sleep with them in the house, and all of these different things. They're locking their cupboards. They're locking away all their meds, everything. Like, it's just utter chaos. And then to watch those relationships begin to be rebuilt, and to watch them interact like in our family camp, in a way that the parents had lost hope often of that being restored. And that success is just unbelievable to watch.
Yeah, I bet. And I know oftentimes they don't want to be there to begin with. I know myself, if I'd been there as a teen, which I should have in a lot of cases, but I definitely would not have wanted to be there. Would have went kicking and screaming. How do you break down those barriers and get them to actually work with you?
So that's our first and biggest challenge, and it always will be, because what young person wants to leave their home, wherever that happens to be? Right now, we have a student from Vancouver and we have a student from Toronto area. So some of our students are coming from a long ways away. They're leaving everything that they know, family, friends, cell phones, all of these things are left behind. And so for them to embrace being here is extremely challenging, actually. So part of what we want to lay out before them is a really basic understanding of what our goals are and how we want to help them. So if I could take just a few minutes to give you a really high level overview, and we do the same thing with our staff that come here, and just try to really uncomplicate the process, both for our staff and for our students. So we'll say, hey, maturity, responsibility, and charity. That's our goal. That's what we're shooting for here. And so we can talk pretty openly with our students and say, you haven't been very mature, you haven't been very responsible, and you haven't really cared about the people around you like you should. Would you agree with that? And they agree, because they know they wouldn't be in our place if that had been the case, right? So that's a no-brainer. It's pretty easy. And then we say, look, basic character qualities, we're going to hold you accountable to these three key things. Every rule in this place has something to do with one of these things: honesty, respect, and obedience. So if we can develop in you honesty, respect, and obedience, that's going to go a long ways for you. It's going to signal maturity, responsibility, and it's going to signal charity. You're going to care about the people around you. So we're moving in that direction. And the way in which we're going to do this, and we just are really clear with them, is through authority, role modeling, and relational influence. And then we explain that with some really basic understanding where, look, you're in our place now, so you don't own this place, and you come into the function that's expected here. It's different than what you expected. So things even as basic as, hey, when we sit down for lunch, we're going to sit down together, we're going to pray, we're going to get our food, seconds is going to be called at a certain point, and you're not going to get up to go do chores until you're permitted to, because we sit down, we eat together, we get to know each other, we communicate. Hey, that might not be what you're used to, but that's what we're going to do here, because we want to interact with you relationally. And so we have some of these structures, but then role modeling and relational influence has everything to do with reaching into the heart. If we can't reach the heart, and the only thing we can do is use external pressure, so a sense of just strong authoritarianism, then their hearts won't have changed, and their response to the world when they leave Rock Solid won't have changed. But yet we know by the scriptures and by even Christ's example that authority will always be a reality in this world. God has called his people to be an example, so role modeling. And Christ himself has modeled for us even these things, even including relational influence. Jesus said to his disciples, I no longer call you servants, but I call you friends. And so we want to engage those basic biblical principles as we work with them. And we find that our students embrace those relationships much quicker than they even thought they would. They find themselves getting along with us as staff much better than they often got along with other adults in their lives. Because for many of them, their relationship with their parents or teachers in school or other authorities, including at times the police, has just simply been a war. That's the world they know. So the world they know in their interactions, especially with the adult world, is it's us versus them. So how do we navigate this world with that understanding that it's us versus them? And so breaking down that reality is one of the greatest privileges we have. And when students share their story at their graduation and they thank their mentor, particularly the person who's invested the most in them, it's an amazing moment, because those mentors have come to mean the world to them.
Yeah, that's why I enjoy your banquets for that reason, because I love those testimonies. I love hearing how they've gone through the program and come out and they feel like they're a better version of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So with the program, I know you guys tie God in at every step. Can you kind of explain how God is brought in at the various stages of their time there?
Sure. So we have a level system for the students to do, which part of it is behavioral expectations. So when they first get here, obviously we don't expect a whole lot. And as they progress, they are expected to be more consistent in their behavior regarding maturity, responsibility, and charity. Those behavior expectations do come out of biblical principles as well, right? Honesty, respect, obedience, all those kind of things. So at every turn, those expectations have an opportunity to bring what God has to say through his word into those expectations. But then part of the level system as well, the other part of the level system is actually assignments that they do during level work time each weekday evening. And these level work assignments will be some Bible memorization. That will be some Bible passage studies, as well as some book studies. And so each of these assignments will draw them into a biblical understanding of, in some senses, their specific issue, or just a broader understanding of God, his word, the gospel, and how God is calling them to follow him. And so those are two key specific areas. And in other parts is just in our school system, we're a fully accredited independent school. So that means that we have the ability to approach all the subjects from a Christian worldview. So even if some of the curriculum comes to us that's not from a biblical worldview, well, we can have conversations about that and bring a biblical worldview into the material. So we can incorporate it in there. When we have a discipline issue, when we have something that's behavioral challenges that we're dealing with, we can bring a biblical worldview and direct specific biblical principles into those conversations, and those kind of things. Things having to do with, in chapel the other day, I asked the question, hey, how many of you expect to be married and potentially fathers someday? And they all expect that. That's going to be a reality maybe in 10 or 15 years. It's like, okay, so God has something to say about your development into a man who can do that well, and maybe better than your family of origin. And so bringing that biblical understanding into, hey, who is God developing you into as a man? Because if you're 30 and your life is made up of video games still, when your family needs you, and that's, you're not going to work, you're not being responsible for their needs, you haven't then developed into who you are, designed by God to be, and God is calling you to something else. So we need to start developing those character qualities now, because you expect to be a husband and a father someday. Well, how are you going to do that if we don't start developing those character qualities now?
Exactly. And when I worked in a group home, that was something that was lacking in a big way, was that biblical foundation. And so it was often harder to get through to some of the teens that we were dealing with, who had gone through a lot of trauma, because there was no set guideline in terms of like faith. It was just, oh, you messed up, you're going to lose technology, or you're going to lose this. But
Yeah.
there was nothing really to go and be like, well, you're losing it, and this is what God has to say about it, kind of that kind of biblical foundation. And so we ended up with teens that would run away, and then the police would bring them back, and if they screwed up too many times, then they would just be out of the program. And I found that really hard, because there was one that I was actually getting through with, but they had like a set curfew that even as a counselor, you had to stop talking to them at that time, and they had to just go to their room, and it was bedtime. Well, one of the kids was older, and he was kind of in his final year of where he would have been at that age of there, and he just didn't. He would open up to me, and I was the only one he would open up to. So we were having a great conversation, and then it was like 9 o'clock hit. It's like, okay, end of conversation, let's go to bed. I'm just like, he's actually opening up to me. I'm actually finding out something that you don't even have in the files, and I'm just expected to end that conversation. And I'm like, I feel like if there was more God-centered focus, that conversation could continue, and you could be like, okay, well, it's 9 o'clock, but he's actually opening up. He's actually sharing something. We can learn something from him and maybe teach him something. And I was upset, because there was a week later that he got booted out of the program
Yeah.
because he ran away. And I'm like, he was finally opening up. I was the one he wouldn't shout at, wouldn't get angry at and curse and swear at. So maybe giving me that time to actually work with him might have made a difference. And that's one of my big regrets, that I didn't. I was fresh out of college. It was like young, and I didn't want to buck the director, but it's like I feel like I should have said something.
Yeah.
And I should have been like, no, I feel like God really wants me to work with this kid right now. He needs it. And I didn't
Yeah.
say anything. And so that's where I appreciate your program, because you guys take that time where you're actually working with the kids one-on-one a little bit closer, than what a traditional group home does. And I love that about Rock Solid. That's one of the reasons why I reached out to you, is because I'm like, this is an organization I think needs some recognition for what they do, because it's important in these kids' lives, and it's making a difference.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What are the future plans for Rock Solid going forward?
I love that question. Um, in some senses, it's like, well, the future plans are in God's hands. We do believe that there needs to be more beds available for young people and for families in crisis. The crisis of addictions is not lessening in Canada. The last 2 years, it's just exploded. And so numerous of our students right now are coming to us even out of the struggle of the isolation, the uncertainty of the world, and all of those different things that have even transpired in the last couple of years. And so the need is only growing. So when I do a presentation in a church, so I travel around and speak in churches and try to help more and more people see what we're doing and come on board and partner with us. One of the things that I do say is that our vision is to see effective biblically based residential treatment programs all across Canada for young people with life controlling issues, for male and females, to help families in crisis. So right now we are just for guys, not because we don't want to work with girls, but because we had to start somewhere, and that's what we've started, and that's what we run right now. If God gives us opportunity to open a girls' campus, we would like that to happen. We believe that absolutely needs to happen. One of our board members is a semi-retired police officer, and his comment at our last board meeting was that the largest growing segment in the justice system right now is young girls, is young ladies. Yeah. And so the need for them to get off the streets, out of their situation, into a safe place where they can actually consider even a different path. And so many of them don't even have the opportunity to consider a different path because their whole scenario is they're locked in, they're trapped, and actually many of them quite literally trapped, and they won't get out of it unless they have a place where they can actually get away. And so for young girls to have a place like this is absolutely vital and essential. So we're asking God for the opportunity to do that. And then beyond that, campuses should be across Canada. I'm in conversation with people from BC. I've had people reach out to me from Ontario. I've talked to people in southern Manitoba. And so there's no lack of need. And so these programs, these facilities or campuses should be in all those different parts. I mean, what would it be like if there was 200 beds available across Canada for guys and girls, rather than just 10? That's a difference that I think we as Christians should strive to make in our country.
Yeah, and reaching them at a young age, because like you say, with girls too, like they get trapped into prostitution because of their addiction. Guys do too in some ways, but I know women, it's more of that, and they usually end up with a pimp that is feeding their addiction to keep them under their thumb. Yeah. And that's one thing I've been working with IJM, and that's been something that they focus on heavily around the world too. And your program, I think, aligns perfectly with the kind of aftercare that they provide. And I think that is very important. And like you say, it is lacking. We do need more of it for both women and for these young men.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've seen a lot of the people that you've dealt with. I've been to your banquets and stuff, so I know the impact that these kind of programs have, and so I know the importance of these programs. And coming from that youth care background, for me, I've seen that what happens when they don't get that help. So how do you balance the stress of being in this position and then going home and balancing your family life? Because I know you've got grandkids now as well. So how have you managed to balance this whole journey?
I think that's always an ongoing endeavor, and I think it has to be. I don't think there's one clean answer. My wife and I, we decided, I think quite intentionally, that we would be partners in ministry, and that our kids would be around the ministries that we were involved in. And quite honestly, Rock Solid, I wouldn't have been able to be involved with Rock Solid and getting Rock Solid started if my wife hadn't partnered in that way. And so even when we started the first 3 summers, we were a summer program at a Bible camp. We stayed in a holiday trailer for weeks on end there as a family. And if that wasn't the case, I wouldn't have been involved. And so incorporating our family into the ministries that God has called us to has been a part of our family culture. But then also through the different stages of our kids' lives, and including now, we just have one still at home, 13-year-old girl, and our other 3 are all adults and on their own. So now some of that is just in a different category. So one of our family culture traditions right now is we do family dinners on Sunday evenings. And so everybody who can, and all of our kids live in the area. So everybody who can comes over for family dinner Sunday night, and we just are together. It's not work. It's not Rock Solid. It's our family. It's our time, and just spending time together. My wife and I try to get away, and historically sometimes it's been true that unless we go away, we don't get away. And so we've lived right on campus for the entire time that we've been on staff here, up until actually quite recently. And so getting some level of disconnect has meant at times, hey, on some kind of regular basis, we need to go away somewhere. Sometimes it's, hey, we have relatives in Alberta, so we go there for a week at a time at times. We go to the spa in Moose Jaw at times. Just different ways that we get away and disconnect. And it's amazing how God refreshes us through those times. Other realities for me, and I'll say this unequivocally, I actually really don't believe that I would be still doing this today if God didn't impress on me the necessity of rituals with Him. So my mornings always start out with time with God. I get up earlier than most people are willing to get up, but I know that if I don't have alone time with God, I can't survive my day or my week or the life that God has called me to. And so I would just say that people who think they can get up and have a piece of toast on their way to work, 5 minutes after getting up or something like that, and really their morning is just busy getting out the door, and then they're at work, and then I don't know how people navigate life that way. I can't do it. I wouldn't be able to do it. We need God, and we need our time with Him. If we're going to be poured out, as the Apostle Paul even said, we need to be filled, and that's time with God and His Word.
Yeah, and that is very, very true. It's why I enjoy prayer walks, so you can have that time of even just communicating with God and giving Him that time to speak to you, and for you to share your concerns, even though God knows them. He wants us to share them.
Absolutely.
That's part of that communication. Where can people find Rock Solid online?
We do have a website, rocksolidrefuge.com. So fairly easy to find us there. There's lots of actually information, not only on the organization and what we do, but also some resources that might be helpful to people who are maybe in a journey of crisis with somebody in their life. If somebody wants their young person in our program, there's a place there to apply. If somebody believes in what we're doing and would like to partner with us in different ways, there's a donation page there too. A key way that people maybe first get engaged with us, even financially, is to sponsor a student. So for $51 a month, sponsor a student. You'll get a bio of that student with a picture, and you can feel a lot more part of their journey. You can pray for them regularly, write them some encouragement cards or notes, maybe a birthday card. And these kinds of things actually really do mean something to our students. They look forward to these communications from their sponsors. And so that's a way that often people get engaged. Being on our newsletter, prayer letter lists is also really helpful. We need people to partner with us in prayer. We have several churches that email us regularly saying, hey, what's your prayer request for this month? And that's just so encouraging to us to know that whole churches are bringing us before the Lord, much less the individuals that God puts us on their hearts.
Yeah, and definitely newsletters is a big one to stay informed. Yeah. So you know what to pray for. And I always leave us off with one final question, and that is a piece of advice. So if you could give one piece of advice for someone who's struggling with a troubled teen, so for the families, what would that be?
Well, I think it's always a multifaceted piece that has to come forward. So first and foremost, where's your relationship with God? Because if you've got a struggling teen, I'll bet you want them to have a relationship with God that is a certain something. And if you're not role modeling that, if that's not a reality for yourself personally, you have to pursue that relationship with God. And as you do that, some of the ways in which you automatically have to engage that is, are you in God's word regularly? Do you understand that he has given us his word to speak to us? And he's given us what we need through his word. And so are we getting to know God through the truth of his word? Are we getting to know God through consistent fellowship with God in prayer? And are we getting to know God through consistent fellowship with God's people? Are we a part of a faith community of Christians who will encourage us, even challenge us as we need? And if there's one thing that is maybe the biggest struggle for a family in crisis or a parent in crisis, it's the sense of aloneness. And even the sense that I can't reach out to anybody because nobody will understand, or they're going to think less of me, but the isolation that happens when a person is in crisis or the family member is in crisis is, I think, one of the greatest enemies that can come against us, because God has built us to need one another. And so those pieces are primary. And then in the context of that, God will give you strength and wisdom to know how to approach. When is it time for me to use a clear directional authority component in my relationship with my son or daughter? What are the role modeling aspects that they need to see in me? If I don't want them to swear at me, I probably shouldn't swear at them. And how am I building the relationship with them? Am I holding my relationship with them out as almost as a carrot, that, hey, if you do good, I'll have a relationship with you. But if you do bad, you're on your own. I won't have anything to do with you. But will we pursue them in relationship? And there's a sense in which even the story of the prodigal son is all of those things. Hey, son, you can go and you can do your thing, but I'm going to be waiting here for you. And when the son returned, the father embraced him as the son, and so the relationship was always there waiting. And so we don't hold the relationship as a carrot or stick, but at the same time, the crisis, the challenges, it does change the relationship too. And that's why they need support around them to navigate these very deep and dark challenges.
Yeah, and that's where your church body comes in, being willing to reach out, and if they're not Christian, well, finding those people in your life who will support you, is definitely key to getting through it. I know it's a challenge. My parents could attest to it, because I was definitely not that easy when I was older.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming on and sharing with us today, Dallas. I really, really appreciate it, and all the best with your continued success in your program, and thank you for doing what you do.
You're very welcome. It's been a privilege to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Cool Explorations. Today we just heard from Dallas Block of Rock Solid Refuge, where you can find them at rocksolidrefuge.com. And we were talking about this safe space where kids can go, teens who are troubled, and they can deal with their addictions and things that are really a struggle for them, so they can get back to living a life that is going to be productive, and they can be part of a family again. Well, I have just been blessed with so many people who are requesting to be on the show, and I'm impressed with how many people want to share their testimonies or what they're doing for the Lord right now. If I haven't got back to you, I promise I will get back to you. I look forward to speaking with each of you and interviewing you, and keep tuning into the show. There's lots of new people that are coming on here, and if you're considering wanting to come on the show, just shoot me an email at tpeters745@gmail.com, and I will get back to you.